So before we actually start working on the wireframe, I want to talk a little bit about branding. So branding, as it started, was originally a way to show ownership, right? So the first thing that probably occurs to you when you think of branding, at least for me, I think about like cowboys, branding their cattle, right? But it goes as far back as in Greek times. A particular potter would make a mark on their pot, and that just lets people know where the pot came from. And originally it was meant mostly as ownership, but over time it actually began having a meaning of like popularity and trustworthiness, particularly during the what do you call it, the Industrial Revolution, when people started making brands that products that were being consumed by the masses. The there weren't a lot of regulations. So what would happen is that people would trust certain brands more than other brands to not have rats in their soup, for instance. So they would know that this brand has a good reputation, and then they would know it's more trustworthy than maybe another brand. Even if that other brand was cheaper, they would trust the more expensive brand. And so it eventually became a very important part of any sort of company or product or service, is their brand. Um, it has kind of evolved since then to have more of this prestige element. A lot of it has to do with how you feel about the company, and how you associate with that company. So, for example, if I were to ask you to picture someone who is a Apple user, okay, now I want you to picture somebody who is a PC or Android user. There was even a whole marketing campaign where they had the two. Remember, they would show like the hip guy and then the businessy guy. I don't know. It's probably before your time, but that there you will choose brands based on their association, and you're like, this is how I see myself, and I relate to them, almost like they're an entity. Um, Another big aspect, I always like to use cars as an example. So I have like a Honda Fit, which is a really basic economy car, but other people might have a Ferrari, right? Now, if you look at those two vehicles, obviously the Ferrari is way cooler. But in essence, they do the same thing. The only difference between the two, I mean, there are differences. I was able to fit a king size bed into my in order to move it in my car. I don't think you can do that with a Ferrari. But obviously, the Ferrari is going to drive a lot faster. But the main reason to buy that Ferrari or whatever high end sports car is the feeling it gives you and the prestige that those around you. Like, the best part of driving one of those vehicles isn't just driving it's having everyone look at you while you drive it, right? And so there is a certain amount of that is attached to it. And you'll see this amongst many different things. So you could take shoes, right? There was a time when like Air Jordans were a big thing. People would get even murdered for these shoes. There was that thing where, was it the Stanley Cup or whatever? Everyone was buying Stanley Cups. I didn't really understand. You know what I mean? So there's just some weird, and people will buy a brand um, because of that, because of what it brings with them. And so to a large extent, the brand can be more valuable than the actual product itself. So from a personal standpoint, my father had passed away, and he had a graphic design business, and he had some success with it, and he had this whole, this all of his customers, and he had a brand that was associated with it when people would see it. We ended up selling all of the equipment to someone we knew, and they took the equipment, they wanted it, but the thing they really wanted was the brand, and we wouldn't sell that to him. We wouldn't give him the name of the brand, because he knew that was more valuable than even the equipment was. He wanted the brand, because with that came all those customers and an understanding of the product that is produced. So I would say branding it could be the most important part of a company. And a lot of times when a company starts, they have to kind of develop their brand and use that in their marketing materials. The reason why I'm bringing it up now is, when we're doing the next part here, more than likely, if you're a web designer, they're going to come to you with a brand, and they're going to say, hey, here's this brand. If you are designing their brand, or you're, helping them decide on it in some way, then you're doing a little bit more than what the web design is, and you should get paid a little bit more. But you want to make sure that you stay on brand. I'm doing air quotes here, and that's sort of important. There's a nice little article here that you can click on, and it kind of talks about branding and like how to brand and some things that you should think about while you're doing it. So I highly suggest reading that article. Hopefully that gives you a good idea. In Digital Imaging 4, we kind of cover branding a little bit more in depth. So if you're more interested in it, you can take that or just do your own research. A bunch of the stuff's online